Thank you to all that are tuning in for ScholarCheck's Financial Aid and Scholarships 101 session. This session is specifically for students and families who attend school in the state of Georgia. You can be looking at colleges and universities all across the United States, but there is going to be some specific information in this recording specifically for students who currently reside in the state of Georgia. To get us started, I want to make sure that everyone who is tuning in really has a good idea when you're thinking about the high level of looking at the different forms of college aid that you can receive going through the college and university financial aid review process. I want you to have a good grasp on the different areas that are going to be a part of this conversation. We're going to start again from that very high level, and then we're going to work our way down and look at more of the specifics of these four different categories. So for starters, we're going to be looking at federal aid and grants. Specifically, we're going to be looking at something called the FAFSA, and then we're also going to be looking at something called the CSS profile. These are two very important forms that are going to play a part for many students in their need-based financial aid review process. The next part are going to be loans. Loans are an extremely personal decision as to whether a student or family, if they have supportive family members, as to whether they want to go that route or not. We are going to dig deeper into what federal loan options a student may have in helping fund part of their college and university, but we are not going to talk about private loans. This is going to be kind of the first and last time you hear that mentioned. When we talk about those scary stories on the news of people having loans that they just can't pay off and the unsurmountable amount of debt that they have, oftentimes private loans are a part of this. They are not as secure. They often have higher interest rates. And so as an organization, ScholarCheck personally likes to steer families away from private loans. So again, that's the first time we're bringing it up and the last time in today's session. Thirdly, we're going to look at scholarships. We're going to look at the difference between college-provided scholarships, scholarships from outside organizations, military scholarships, athletic scholarships, really the whole gamut, what the differences are between them, how they again come together to help reduce the overall tuition that a student needs to pay, and some good simple strategy that you can do to apply to as many scholarships as possible without it consuming all the extra hours that you have in the day. The last area that we're going to look at are state-funded scholarships and grant money. So specifically, again, this is for students who reside in the state of Georgia. We're going to do a breakdown of the Hope Scholarship, the Zell Miller Scholarship, Hope Grant, Zell Miller Grant, what that looks like, what the minimum GPAs and test scores are needed to obtain that funding, and how it gets applied to your overall college or university's tuition. So again, looking at that upper level here, right, the broad overview, I also want to make sure that you're empowered to know what the financial aid timeline looks like for the majority of students and families. The biggest thing to know is for those that are tuning in who do not have a student who is a senior in high school, there's not much that you can be doing at this exact moment when it comes to need-based financial aid, okay? Now, again, it's great that you are learning about this process and scholarship applications absolutely pertain to you. But when it comes to the need-based financial aid process, this is really focused on our high school seniors. In particular, October 1st is going to be the opening date for, again, that form called the FAFSA and the CSS profile. So up until October 1st, even seniors, there's not much that you can be doing. October 1st is kind of that golden date when everything opens up. You could go into these different platforms, create an account, start working on the process, but unfortunately, all of that would get erased once October 1st opens up and they've done some kind of the latest and greatest updates to the form that are required to be reviewed for need-based financial aid. So hold tight. If you're watching this before October 1st, you're going to need to wait just a little bit longer. And for those following after October 1st, now is the time. Do not delay. Go in and complete the FAFSA and the CSS profile if that pertains to you. The next part of the timeline that I want to focus on is the January through April time period. So while we encourage many students and families to submit that FAFSA, for example, as early as possible after that October 1st deadline, the financial aid package that you receive from each college and university most likely is not going to be received by you until somewhere between January and April of your senior year. And there's a few reasons for that. For starters, you can't even be reviewed for a financial aid package until one, of course, the FAFSA has been submitted, but more importantly, that you've applied to the college and that, knock on wood, you've been admitted. It's really important to know that in the kind of the timeline of things that you need to get done as a student, you need to be applying to schools, you need to get your admission decision. And at that point, the financial aid office for each college or university will start generating and reviewing a financial aid package for you if, again, you've already applied, been admitted to the institution, and have submitted that FAFSA information. You do want to make sure that you're getting this package as early as possible in the spring of your senior year, because there's what we like to call the May 1 deposit deadline. This is something that nonprofit accredited universities in the United States have really come to an agreement on, that all students have until May 1st to commit to the university of their choice. But you want to make sure that you have that financial aid package handy and that you are comfortable with it before submitting your one and only tuition deposit at the college or university that you plan to attend in the fall. The third part of this timeline is going to be focused on the summer, specifically looking at Hope and Zell Miller scholarships. So this is really important, again, for our Georgia students, because looking at Hope and Zell Miller, that can cover a significant portion of your tuition if you are planning to go to a public university within the University System of Georgia system here in Georgia, or even if you're using that additional money to bring down the cost of a private institution in the state of Georgia. What is important to note, though, is Hope and Zell Miller do not get formally applied to a student's tuition bill until your final high school transcript has been received by that school. So typically that's not going to happen until summer. We also need the University System of Georgia in particular to release what their upcoming tuition is going to be for that following school year. Again, that does not normally get solidified until the early summer. So just know some of those final numbers on your financial aid package may say something along like tentative or expected, but this is not your final offer. It is not that you're going to lose Hope or Zell Miller. You're going to receive one or the other if you qualify. However, it is just not formally going to come off that tuition bill until the summertime after those other steps have been completed. Now, gearing back to the FAFSA, because this is really going to be the meat of the conversation that we're about to have here in this presentation. The FAFSA stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. All students should be filling out the FAFSA. And the number one thing to note is that it's in the name, is it is free. Unfortunately, if you Google the FAFSA, there are going to be some websites that pop up that are not through the government, and they will try to trick you, and they will be charging you to complete the form. Well, for starters, you'll lose money, so please don't do that. Every dollar is precious. But the second point of it is, if you submit that form, you haven't actually submitted the official form that is going to help you be reviewed for need-based financial aid from the colleges and the universities that you are looking to possibly attend. So please, please, please keep that at the forefront. Just to reiterate one more time, October 1st of student senior year, that is when this FAFSA form opens. You can go to that FAFSA.gov website that you see at the top here, or studentaid.gov. It all leads to the same place. Now, when you're filling out the FAFSA, there's going to be a part for the student and a part for family to complete. If a student has family in the picture, okay? Now, there's different portions to the FAFSA that can make it a little bit easier and shorter for many families. And we're going to talk about that more in depth. But for the families that aren't able to take a hold of what's called an IRS data retrieval tool, there's multiple documents that you're going to want to have handy. For all students and families, you're going to need your social security number. A social security number is required for a student to be reviewed for need-based financial aid through the federal government. Unfortunately, at this point in time, DACA students are not reviewed for need-based financial aid. Students who have a green card and are a permanent resident of the United States will need to have both their social security number and their alien registration number handy for this form. Certain families, not all, are going to need their tax returns and W-2 information stating back to 2021. That is going to be the information that the FAFSA focuses on. So they like to say it's information based on the prior year. So students, if you are looking to attend college for the first time for fall 2023, they're going back 2 years in taxes to 2021 and using that information to help generate whether you qualify for need-based financial aid. We're also going to talk about something called the FSA ID, and that's going to be coming up in our next slide. But just know that an FSA ID number is needed for all contributors to the FAFSA. So whether that's students, if they have both parents in the picture, again, you will all need your own FSA ID. And then you'll want to have information handy on additional income and investment documents. Most of the time, this is geared towards the parents, but there are certain circumstances for students who, again, if you are emancipated or a ward of the court, and if you do have any income that is in your name and investments, you would also want to have this information handy. Then we're going to talk about something called verification. Verification is something that happens to a large portion of families. We just, again, want you to feel empowered to know what that is, to let you know you've done absolutely nothing wrong. But it is really important to be aware if you have been flagged for verification. And then last but not least is something called the EFC. This is your estimated family contribution. Based upon the information obtained through the FAFSA form, the federal government uses a calculation to determine, based upon that information, how much they expect family members to contribute towards a student's education. Your estimated family contribution may be as low as $0. It could be $100,000. Again, it's going to be based upon that information, primarily pulled in from the tax returns and W-2 information that is collected throughout the process. So going back to that FSA ID, I always like to explain to families that the FSA ID is kind of like your social security number for the FAFSA. This is your way of creating a very secure, unique login that is tied to you. And it's important to know that when you get your FSA ID established, and this will be the first step in completing the FAFSA, that this is your ID forever. Okay, it is tied to you. So students, one day, if you have a family of your own and you need to complete the FAFSA, you would actually be using the exact same FSA ID. So truly, when I say this is yours forever, it is yours forever throughout your life. So it's important to keep this information handy. The FSA ID is the only part of the FAFSA process that a family or student can obtain prior to October 1st of their senior year. But again, while I love for everybody to have their FSA ID handy, you only want to do this if you have a secure way of keeping track of what that FSA ID is, so that when you do come your senior year of high school, you haven't lost that information. I'll give you my own handy trick. What I've done is I have a completely fake name in my cell phone, and the phone number for that person is my FSA ID. It's just kind of my easy way to know what my login is, and I can reference it at any time. But again, you would want to make sure it's secure and not something that somebody could easily identify. Another portion of the FAFSA, and the FAFSA, it really is great at walking families through the different questions and answering kind of the big questions that come along the way. But what will really dictate what the FAFSA process looks like for each student is whether they are considered a dependent or an independent. The majority of students are going to be listed as dependents, meaning that they currently, live with their mom or dad in the situation. And again, they are not the sole income barriers for their life. They are not emancipated, for example, very different areas. But this particular list, and this would be listed on the FAFSA, is a quick and easy way to see whether a student might be considered an independent. So for example, if a student was born before January 1st, 1999, they would be viewed as an independent student. So the information on the FAFSA is going to be based on the student and that student alone, okay? There are going to be some other questions on here as well in terms of foster care, for example. So it's important that you go through this list just to make sure that you are, again, establishing your dependency status correctly when you start the FAFSA process. Now I want to wrap back to what is called the IRS data retrieval tool. So thankfully, the FAFSA has made some really big strides in trying to streamline this process for families so that it's a much quicker and easier tool to take advantage of. And the IRS data retrieval tool plays a large role in that. So when families particularly are going through the FAFSA, it is going to ask information such as, did you file, your tax return for 2021? If you say yes, most of the time it's then going to populate a little box that says, great, you qualify to use the IRS data retrieval tool. If a family has not submitted their taxes for 2021, even if they still plan to do so, oftentimes you cannot take advantage of this IRS data retrieval tool because, again, it is using that information from your tax return from 2021 to pull in the bulk of information that is needed to complete the FAFSA. I've listed out some different areas below of often what, kind of gives the red stop sign for the FAFSA to not allow a family to use the IRS data retrieval tool. But you will know this very early on in the process. And again, if you're a family that doesn't get to take advantage of the data retrieval tool, that is absolutely okay. You're just going to, again, need to have more of your W-2 information, tax information handy so that you can answer the questions correctly that it's going to walk you through. Then that other area of verification, this is really, really important. So listen up, this applies to everyone. So we have about 20% currently of students and families when they complete the FAFSA, they get flagged for verification. This does not mean that you have done anything wrong. Sometimes we like to relate this to going through TSA and security check when you're going through the airport. So when you go through the airport security, they actually have to pull certain people to the side, even if nothing raised a red flag, just to, again, make sure that they're kind of following proper protocol and calling people out at random. Verification does this as well. When you go through and you submit the FAFSA, the federal government can decide whether at random you have been chosen to be verified. It just means that they need to check off a couple boxes and confirm that truly the numbers provided in terms of the areas of income are correct. Then there's the side of going through airport security where, yes, you go through the scanner. They see something that looks slightly suspicious, but the majority of people are still going to get to go on that flight. They just need to make sure, again, that that red flag can be taken away. That's another form of verification. So, for example, I was actually working with a family this past week, and they almost typed in an extra zero when typing in their income for the year. Well, that extra zero, that would not line up with everything. And if they had submitted that, one of two things would have happened. One, they wouldn't have qualified for any need-based aid, or they would have been flagged for verification because the federal government decided that something just didn't seem right when reviewing the numbers. And again, that's where verification really is here to protect you and to make sure that you are being reviewed for as much need-based aid as possible. What's important to know about the verification process, however, is that instead of being informed by the federal government that you have been flagged for verification, a student is going to find out directly from each college and university that they have applied to and sent their FAFSA information to. And within that, each college has a different way of notifying students if they have been flagged for verification. The most popular way for a college or university to notify a student that they've been flagged for verification, and again, this means that there are steps that a student needs to take before they can be given a need-based financial aid package, is through their application status portal. So the majority of colleges and universities in the United States will supply students a link to an application status check portal so they can see, for example, did their high school transcript get submitted along with their college application process? Did their recommendation letters get received? Their test scores if they chose to submit them? But this portal is great because, again, you can keep checking back. And for many colleges and universities, your admissions decision is also updated in this portal at the same time as receiving it by email and sometimes by snail mail. But this is a really nice, secure way for the financial aid offices for the colleges and universities to let a student know there's additional documentation needed because they were flagged for verification. So it's really important, students, that you are checking those portals for multiple reasons. Another good reason would be housing notifications, for example. So make that a routine of something that you're checking once a week. The other popular way that colleges contact students is through email. However, if a college or university has supplied you a university email right when you applied, which is quite popular. For example, Georgia College in the state of Georgia, you apply, you get what's called a Bobcats email address. Again, you need to be checking that routinely because that is a secure way for their financial aid office to send you emails with status updates regarding your financial aid package, housing, and a slew of other items that you're going to want to be paying attention to. From there, it's going to be a mixture. Some colleges are going to reach out to students by snail mail. by the email that they have on file, for example, your Gmail account. But you need to be paying attention to all these different areas. If you know that you completed the FAFSA in October or November of your senior year, and you are still waiting for a financial aid package come the first week of March, please make sure that you pick up the phone or email each financial aid office for each college and university that you still have not received a package for. Because again, the likelihood is you probably got flagged for verification, or something went wrong in the process, right? In terms of that information getting sent over. So you really want to advocate for yourself to make sure that you are getting that package with plenty of time before that May 1st deposit deadline. To give you comfort, this is what student aid or FAFSA.gov looks like. So if this is not the webpage that you are seeing, you are in the wrong place. Okay. That is really, I want you guys to have a good grasp of that, to feel comfort. We're then going to be focusing right here at the top in terms of that, navigation bar and where you need to go. So specifically, we're going to be looking at that tab, Apply for Aid. If you click on that Apply for Aid tab, it's going to do a drop down to several different areas. For most students, the first part is going to be the complete the FAFSA form. That's going to take you to that main portion of the site to be able to get started in that process. Okay. But as you can see here, FAFSA.gov and studentaid.gov is home to multiple things. If you do take out any federal loans, this is going to be your home website. You will complete the FAFSA every single year you are in college. This is not a one-time deal. So again, be familiar with this website. It's only going to provide you comfort in that process. And this is what the welcome page looks like when you click on that Apply for Aid and say, yes, I want to complete my FAFSA. It's going to ask you if this is your first time logging in. It would then help you get that FSA ID number. And again, students and families, you will all have your own FSA ID. That is really important to note. And if you're a returning user, this allows you to go back in to see your student aid report, which is given to you after you've completed the FAFSA. And it also allows you to correct any information or add additional schools that you need this FAFSA information sent to. Now, one of my favorite tools that the FAFSA has are what are called demo rolls. This is a way for you to go through the FAFSA as a fake student. Feel free to take a screenshot of this to head to this website. If you pause this video, this is kind of going to be your home base for some really wonderful tools to take advantage of to become more comfortable with the FAFSA application process. And I'm going to show you just in a snippet what that looks like to go through a demo for FAFSA. So the FAFSA gives you multiple student situations, as well as family member situations that you can pop into that demo test site. And again, if you see that link below, that is the homepage to be able to enter this type of information. So Maxine is one of FAFSA's fake students. This is the username, password, and additional information that they have supplied us to be able to walk Maxine through the FAFSA application. So when we input that information, we are going to the homepage of the FAFSA. We've logged her in. We've used all the information they supplied us. And I want to just kind of show you the type of questions that you're going to come across when filling out the FAFSA. So the first is going to be the student demographics section. Okay, so this is asking a student kind of where they are in their educational journey. Okay, so for high school students, you are going to be looking at high school diploma when it's asking what your completion status will be. You also have the ability to answer that you got a GED, for example. It is going to show you all those different options. The next question is what college degree or certificate program that you are looking to seek for the 2022-2023 school year. Okay, so in Maxine's instance, she is looking to go get a 4-year degree. So this is her first bachelor's degree. She could also input that she's looking to get her associate's degree, for example. It's going to give her all those different options. And then we're going to jump down and look at that question. It's where it says, what will your college grade level be when you begin the 2022-23 school year? Okay, so in Maxine's instance, she has never attended college. This is her first time. A popular question that we get are students who take advantage of dual enrollment course credits. The way that you should phrase this question in your mind is, have you taken a college course after receiving your high school diploma or GED? If the answer is yes, then you would not mark never attended. You would say that you have attended college. But for students who are looking at dual enrollment credit, for example, you've never attended college in the eyes of the FAFSA. The other question that you're going to see on this page is, are you interested in being considered for work study? Always say yes. We're going to talk about work study in a few slides here. So we'll go into the nitty gritty there, but you should know, always mark yes. You want to be reviewed for as much funding as possible. The next area are going to be your school selection. So this is where a student can submit up to 10 colleges that they plan to apply to, and they would like the FAFSA information to be sent over. So in this instance, Maxine is looking at Florida Southern College in Lakeland, Florida. She was able to just click the add more schools button there. You can genuinely just do a search. You can put in Florida Southern. If you put in University of Georgia, for example, the FAFSA is so good that it actually pops up with the majority of University System of Georgia schools that we have in the state. So again, really easy to add the schools on the list. It's also going to ask Maxine, does she plan to live on campus? She has three options. Does she plan to live on campus of Florida Southern, off campus, or with a parent? Again, the majority of colleges and universities do require students to live on campus for their first year. So automatically, you should want to collect, yes, I'm going to live on campus, but your financial aid package can also differ greatly whether you're living on campus or not. So I always tell students it's better to know how much aid you would receive if you were living on campus. And if you find that there's still some financial aid gaps there and that you need to live off campus or with a parent because that's what's most affordable, you can have your financial aid package adjusted to reflect that you will not be living on campus. Okay. If in an instance you are applying to more than 10 colleges and universities, what you would need to do is you would complete this entire FAFSA form, have it submitted to the 10 schools that you initially listed. After that submit button is done and you've signed the document, you would then go back in to edit the FAFSA. You would delete some of those colleges, add in the ones that weren't initially included, and then re-sign and submit the form. That is how that information can get over to all colleges if you have more than 10 that you plan to apply to. So going through the rest of the FAFSA, we're not going to go through all of this in this particular presentation, but when it talks to you about that dependency status that I mentioned earlier, right? Is a student dependent or an independent? This is what these questions are initially getting at. They're trying to figure out, again, does a student live with both of their parents, whether they're married or unmarried? Do they have parents who are divorced or separated, living in different households? Again, are they legally adopted? Depending on a student's answer to this, specific questions are going to be generated for you to complete. So it's really important that you give the right answer on this. The nice thing is, again, if you're kind of confused as to what should be the right answer for you, they have different drop downs and little kind of information sections that you can pull up that specifically walk you through how to identify what family situation is the correct answer for your particular home unit. So going forward for parents, this is that section where we would start to figure out whether you qualify to use the IRS data retrieval tool. So in this question, they're asking if Maxine's mother has completed an IRS income tax return. She says yes. And so because of that, she is able to, again, take advantage of the IRS data retrieval tool. Following this section are several pages of questions. Even if you get to take advantage of the IRS data retrieval tool, you're still going to see those questions, but it will let you know that the information has automatically been applied for you, but you still can see those questions. For parents that do not get to take advantage of the IRS data retrieval tool, it's going to have about 3 pages worth of questions. And again, for the most part, if you're looking at your W-2, it's going to tell you, hey, in question 2A on your W-2, please input that number here. It is like filing your taxes, okay? So the FAFSA, again, is really not something to be scared of. And every single student should be completing it, regardless of whether they think that they'll receive need-based aid or not, okay? You always want to at least do it the first year and see what the results are. Now, in addition to the FAFSA, and I really want to emphasize that, in addition to completing the FAFSA, there are a few hundred colleges in the US that use something called the CSS profile. This is, again, in supplement to the FAFSA. The CSS profile is run through College Board, so the same organization that oversees the SAT. And this form is a little bit more invasive. It's going to ask just kind of the more detailed questions that really get into a family's financial circumstance, everything from the type of car that you drive, for example. Okay, it really gets into those types of questions. And unlike the FAFSA, there is a charge for the CSS profile. It's $25 for the first school. If you are applying to more than one CSS profile school, it's $16 per additional school. Okay. And if you do qualify for reduced lunch, or you received an SAT or ACT fee waiver, for example, then you most likely qualify for a fee waiver for the CSS profile. I will show you where to look for that in just a second. Unlike the FAFSA, there is no lovely IRS data retrieval tool, right? Because this is a private organization. It is not a government run form. So you are going to need all the forms with you, your tax returns, your W-2s, bank statements, investment information, assets. You're going to need all of that handy to be able to input kind of page by page on the CSS profile. But really, who uses the CSS profile, right? So we talked about how there's a few hundred colleges in the US who use it. Primarily, they are private schools. But in the state of Georgia, we're kind of the anomaly. Georgia Tech is actually a public university who uses the CSS profile. And the CSS profile really benefits a student who needs additional need-based grants and scholarships that are coming from the school's endowment. So again, this is allowing a school to potentially give you additional funding on top of federal grant money that you may qualify based off of the FAFSA information. So oftentimes a student can be applying to a school that requires a CSS profile, and they are receiving a tremendous amount of aid based upon the amount of need that the CSS profile determines that your family may have. This is what the homepage of the CSS profile looks like. So again, so you're comfortable. It is definitely branded just like the SAT, right? Because it's College Board. So just kind of know that that's the instance that we're looking at. And for those that I mentioned the fee waiver for, so when you're looking at the top navigation bar, if you look the third one over, it's going to be fee waivers right there. It is going to walk you through the form and how to receive a fee waiver to be able to submit the CSS profile. If that fee is a barrier for your family to be able to submit this additional information. All right, so you've completed the FAFSA. Maybe you have also completed the CSS profile. So what comes next, right? What is that financial aid package going to look like? So there's 3 different areas that a student is most likely going to see or come across when they receive their need-based financial aid package from each of the colleges and universities that they've applied to. And the package is going to look different from every school in how it's organized. There is no universal form. So you may see this information on grants and federal loans and work study in a different order, depending on each school, okay? But it's important to be able to identify these 3 areas if they exist on your package so that you know what you need to be paying attention to. So the first area are grants. So students who show that they have the highest amount of need based off of, again, that estimated family contribution may qualify for federal grants. This is money that is given to you per year, and it comes straight off your tuition bill. And remember, you may receive a grant money for your freshman year. You need to be completing the FAFSA every single year in college to make sure that you can still receive this additional grant money to bring down your overall tuition cost. So Pell Grants are going to be that first area that a student may see on their financial aid package. Pell Grant is a range. It can go up towards $6,895 per academic year, okay? If a student qualifies for Pell Grant, they may also receive on their package something called the FSEOG grant. It's kind of a mouthful, right? With this grant, though, there's been less and less of this supplied to colleges and universities. And so not all colleges and universities automatically apply this to a student in their financial aid package. As a student, again, you need to advocate for yourself in this process to make sure that you are receiving as much aid as possible to bring down your overall tuition costs. So I would always recommend that a student calls each financial aid office early on in the process and ask them if they qualify for an FSEOG grant if they do not see it on their financial aid package, and ask if they, again, can receive some additional money. You could receive upwards of an additional $4,000 per academic year. The reason, again, that this is not automatically going on so many Pell Grant students' financial aid packages is because there is a limited amount of this particular grant for the colleges and universities to supply students. And so oftentimes they're holding on to it for a student who has expressed strong interest in the university and is looking for additional ways to bring down the overall cost. So again, advocate for yourself, okay? The next area are going to be federal loans. So a student may or may not qualify for federal loans. There's two types of loans that a student may see on their financial aid package. One are unsubsidized loans, and the second are subsidized loans, okay? If you're going to take out loans, this should be the first place that you start in that process, because these are going to be the most secure, the lowest interest rate. And I'm going to easily explain to you the difference between a subsidized loan and an unsubsidized loan, okay? An unsubsidized loan means that the interest rate for that loan starts the day you start classes. A subsidized loan means that the interest rate will start after you graduate from college or for any reason decide to take yourself out of your classes, okay? So again, if you were offered both of these loans and for whatever reason you decided, I only need to take out one loan, you would want to take out the subsidized loan because it's going to save you a tremendous amount of money if your interest rate does not start until 4 years down the line, for example, okay? If you are offered loans, just to reemphasize, you do not have to accept these loans. They are just a part of the review process in your need-based financial aid package. A third area of federal loans that we're going to talk about quickly here are something called Parent Plus loans. Subsidized loans and unsubsidized loans are in a student's name. It's on their credit report. It is their legal obligation to repay those loans. Parent Plus loans, on the other hand, are just that. They are in the parent's name and it is their legal obligation to repay those loans. Families, you can make a private agreement with your student that they are on the hook for paying off those loans. Unfortunately, in the legal eyes, it still falls on you in your credit report if those loans are not paid off in a timely manner. So Parent Plus loans are not going to be a part of a need-based financial aid package, but oftentimes families are in a position where they need to come up with some additional money to pay tuition. And so financial aid offices in particular are going to navigate families towards a Parent Plus loan if that's something they're comfortable with, because again, these are going to be the most secure and low interest rate loans that you can get your hands on. You can apply for Parent Plus loans exactly in the same spot as the FAFSA. So if you go to studentaid.gov, there is going to be a section of the website specifically to be able to apply for a Parent Plus loan. The third area of a financial aid package that a student may see is going to be the work study section. So not all students qualify for work study. Work study is often first come, first serve. So again, when you're completing that FAFSA early on, right, as soon as October 1st hits, you want to be on top of this. Again, there's a limited amount of money that is supplied from the federal government to colleges and universities to supply students to basically have on-campus jobs. But the idea is that a student is working a small amount of hours at that on-campus job, and that money that they make is getting contributed towards their overall tuition bill, okay? So this isn't free money per se. Students, you do have to put in a little bit of a time and work into a job to bring down your overall tuition. But many, many students take advantage of work study in that process. So that's why when we fill out the FAFSA and it asked, do you want to be considered for work study? Always say yes. Always say yes. You want to make sure that if there are jobs being set aside for you that, again, are going to help you bring down overall tuition costs, that you can take advantage of that. Now, shifting from need-based financial aid packages, right? Specifically need-based, looking from the FAFSA, the CSS profile, right? I want to look at scholarships with all of you. And so there's 5 big areas when we're talking about scholarships. We're looking again at those college-specific scholarships, both merit and need-based, outside organizations, whether it's Coca-Cola, if you're involved with HOSA, or your local Rotary, state-funded, Hope and Zell Miller, for example, athletic scholarships, NCAA, Division I, Division II, and military, whether that is because a student is honorably looking to serve our country, whether that's through an ROTC scholarship, whether it's looking through, directly enlisting in the military or doing National Guard, many, many areas that a student can help lessen, the tuition burden. And then also students who, are children of veterans. So again, if a parent is able to apply their GI Bill or their yellow ribbon. We want to, again, make sure that you know that these are things that you can take advantage of. Shifting back to athletics for a moment here, I really want to emphasize to the students listening, please do not rely on an athletic scholarship to cover your tuition cost. The amount of students who receive an athletic scholarship at all, let alone a substantial athletic scholarship, is so negligible. Okay. So again, do not rely on this paying for your college tuition. On top of the fact that most students don't receive a substantial athletic scholarship or even at all to play in college, it's also important to consider two other scenarios. So one is going to be, oftentimes athletic recruits were one of the best players on their team. They got a lot of playing time. When you get to college, right, you're competing on your team amongst many other amazing athletes. And so you may not be getting as much playing time as you expected. And so because of this, we often see students who get onto a D1 or a D2 NCAA athletic team at their college or university that they've committed to. And they realize they're just not really enjoying it as much because, again, they're not getting that same amount of playing time. But what happens if you have an athletic scholarship, even if it covers just a few $1,000s, if you decide that you don't want to play anymore for that team, that scholarship also goes away. So again, that can be a lot of unneeded pressure on a student. The other side of athletic scholarships to be aware of is if a student gets injured. If you're injured and eventually it's deemed that you are not going to be able to return to the team, again, there goes your athletic scholarship. You need to make sure you have a plan outside of it, because there's nothing worse than watching a very talented athlete have that scholarship taken away and they're left with kind of two unfortunate choices, right? They either stay and maybe they're having to now pay the full boat in terms of tuition and they weren't prepared for that, or they're kind of forced to transfer to a different college or university that is a better fit tuition wise. And worst case scenario, and this always breaks our heart, is when we see athletic scholarships, go away and then that student ends up not completing their college degree because they felt like financially it wasn't obtainable. Again, have a game plan outside of your athletic scholarship. For the military, to wrap back to that for a second, for parents that are veterans who are listening, or students, if you have parents that are veterans, it's really important to find out who for each college and university that you're applying to, who is their veteran liaison, for example. So sometimes in the admissions office, there might be one admissions counselor who has developed an expertise working with veterans, specifically helping with the GI Bill and yellow ribbon. There may be a specific counselor in the financial aid office who's able to help. And some colleges and universities who have such large veteran populations, Mississippi State is a great example of that. They have a Veterans Affairs office to be able to help with this entire process. They would love to hear from you sooner than later to, again, make sure that they can confirm how much funding is available and what steps need to be taken to get that applied to your tuition bill. You do not want to wait to the last minute or make any false assumptions as to how much funding may be available to you. So shifting, specifically looking at those state-funded scholarships and grants, we're going to focus on Hope and Zell Miller here for a minute. So for students who are looking to receive an associate's or a bachelor's degree, you are going to be looking at Hope Scholarship and or Zell Miller Scholarship if you qualify. Hope Scholarship is going to be for students who have what's called a Hope GPA in high school of a 3.0 or higher by the time that you graduate, or an ACT score of 24, or on the SAT an 1160, okay? And those can be super scored in the process. What's really important with Hope is that Hope GPA is not going to be most likely listed on your high school transcript. On your high school transcript, you may see what's called a weighted GPA or an unweighted GPA. The Hope GPA is its own thing. It is kind of like the two had a baby. It's a fusion between the two, okay? So it is going to be looking at your core academic courses. So your humanities courses, right? Your English, your world history, US history courses, for example, your world language classes that you took. Did you take French or Spanish, for example? It's going to be looking at your math and science, but it is not going to be looking at any of your elective courses, okay? So again, this is a different GPA calculation. It is also streamlined into how much extra weight you receive for honors or AP or dual enrollment courses. If you go to the Georgia Student Finance Commission website, okay, that is where you can go log in and identify what your Hope GPA is. It is really important that you know this because sometimes students are shocked to find out that they thought they qualified for the Hope Scholarship, but they had missed it by just a little bit. Okay. Hope Scholarship covers 80% of in-state tuition at public universities in the state of Georgia. It does not include their fees, which can be upwards of a couple $1,000s. It also does not cover housing, your meal plan, or books. So you still need to have a plan as to how you're going to pay the additional 20% of tuition in addition to the fees, housing, meal plan, and books part of your obligation, okay? If you qualified for need-based aid, that could help cover a portion of this, but for the most part, students in the state of Georgia are going to need to come forward with some funding on their own, okay? To keep your Hope Scholarship, you do need to maintain a 3.0 in college. There are going to be different check marks along the way with your credit hours, and that gets reported to the state. If for some reason you don't maintain that 3.0 in college, you will lose your Hope Scholarship, but you can regain it after bringing your GPA back up after so many credit hours. So keep with it. In the same vein, if you're a high school student who, for example, you don't have a 3.0 Hope GPA, you have, let's say, a 2.8, a 2.9. I had a student one year who had a 2.99 Hope GPA. Oh, it really crushed me inside. You can gain Hope while you're in college, okay? So while you may have to be paying significantly more that first year, if you pull that GPA up to a 3.0 in college, you can qualify for the Hope Scholarship. That's really important to keep in mind and to keep you motivated, okay? The other scholarship that the state of Georgia gives out to students is the Zell Miller Scholarship. A student either receives Zell Miller or Hope. They do not receive both. Zell Miller scholarships are for students who are at the top of their academic class. They need to have a 3.7 Hope GPA, and then they also need test scores. So Hope Scholarship, you need one or the other. Zell Miller, you need both. For Zell Miller, in addition to that 3.7 Hope GPA, you need either a 26 on the ACT or a 1200 on the SAT. Little tip here. If for some reason you had a 25 on the ACT, you weren't planning on retaking it, you can retake the ACT at the end of your senior year, for example. And if you receive that 26, you would receive Zell Miller. So it is sometimes worth retaking the test to see if you can receive that additional funding. Zell Miller for tuition covers 100% for in-state public universities. Again, it also does not cover fees, housing, meal plan, and books. But this is a significant scholarship that students can apply to, again, a public university in the state of Georgia. When you're in college, you need to maintain a 3.3 GPA. If your GPA drops below this in college, you will lose Zell Miller and would drop down to Hope if you still had a 3.0. You can regain Zell Miller one time, but if your GPA were to go below a 3.3 again, you could not regain the Zell Miller scholarship. Another thing to note, unlike the Hope Scholarship that can be gained in college for a student who has, again, less than a 3.0, Zell Miller cannot be gained in college, okay? So again, those are kind of the two differences between those two particular programs. If you are looking at a private university in the state of Georgia, you can apply your Hope or Zell Miller scholarship. Just know it's not going to cover that 80% or 100% of tuition. It is going to cover the physical dollar value that is attached to Hope or Zell Miller. So it's just an additional scholarship that you can apply to those private universities to bring down the cost. So you're definitely not losing the value. It's just a different percentage of tuition that's going to drop from it. The other area of Hope and Zell Miller are going to be Hope grants and Zell Miller grants. These are specifically for students who are looking to do a certificate or a diploma program when looking at the technical system in Georgia. Okay, so the Technical College System of Georgia, TCSG. For those, you might be looking at Lanier Tech or Chattahoochee Tech, for example. Those are programs that you can apply the Hope grant or the Zell Miller grant to. Unlike the scholarship side, with these grants, there is not a minimum high school GPA to qualify for them. However, each program that you're applying to, each certificate or diploma program has their own eligibility requirements. So those may have a GPA requirement, but in terms of actually using Hope or Zell Miller grant money, there is no minimum GPA that you need to have. The biggest thing that a student needs to pay attention to are going to be the GPAs that they must maintain at certain checkpoints to maintain that grant funding, to make sure it's available to you. So for the HOPE grant, it's going to be a 2.0 GPA in college that you need to maintain to be able to use this funding. For Zell Miller grant, it's going to be a 3.5 GPA at the end of each term. Okay. So again, pay attention to those things. So again, you can take this additional grant money to significantly reduce the amount of tuition you're paying for a certificate or diploma program for the technical college systems of Georgia. If you're not familiar already, I would love to make sure that all students and families are familiar with this website that you see here. It's the Georgia Student Finance Commission. This is home for the state to, again, when you're looking at HOPE and Zell Miller, this is your one-stop shop that you need. It's also a great free resource for you to take advantage of. So please make sure that you go to gafutures.org or the Georgia Student Finance Commission portion of that website. There is something called the Georgia Student Finance Application. This application is used to make sure that your HOPE or Zell Miller is properly applied to your tuition bill. If you fill out the FAFSA, which all of you should have if you follow our advice, then your HOPE and Zell Miller will automatically get qualified once again that each college receives your final high school transcript and or those test scores to confirm your eligibility. If a family decides to not fill out the FAFSA for any reason, or wants to go the extra mile and also complete the Georgia Student Finance application, this is actually going to save you some steps throughout your college career. What's nice about the Georgia Student Finance application is a student can fill this out one time. And even if they they forget to complete the FAFSA, their sophomore or junior or senior year of college, they will still be protected in making sure that that HOPE or Zell Miller money is being applied to their tuition bill. So I always say students go the extra mile, complete the FAFSA, but also go to this website, complete the Georgia Student Finance application. And that way, if life gets to you and you forget to do anything, you are protected for at least those first 4 years of college that your HOPE or Zell Miller scholarship is going to be applied to your overall tuition bill. So shifting from those state funded grants and scholarships, I want to talk a little bit about merit scholarships, in particular, merit scholarships that come specifically from the colleges and universities you're applying to. Now, every college and university has a different merit scholarship review process, an application process. So it's, again, important that you stay on top of this because you don't want to miss out on free money. You earn this, right? Merit scholarships are based upon your academic performance. And the advice that I'm about to give you also applies to need-based scholarships that come specifically from colleges and universities. So when you're researching the colleges, right, you've probably researched when their application deadlines are, but it's just as important to research the scholarship deadlines and what their process looks like. For some colleges, they make it really easy. They automatically review you for these scholarships when you apply. One-stop shop, very easy. The majority of colleges have a separate application process, whether that's as little as checking a box on the application to let them know that you want to be reviewed from scholarships, to an extensive separate scholarship application that requires you to write one or more essays that reviews you for all their scholarships, or maybe even just one specific scholarship. Again, make sure you do this research so that you don't miss the ball on the free money, okay? It's also important with those deadlines to kind of think, hey, I know that colleges allow me to apply later into my senior year, but for the most part, scholarship application deadlines are always very early in a student's senior year. The easy trick is if you know what the early action deadline is for a college university, most likely that is also their scholarship deadline, okay? So for example, Alabama gives out some great money to students and they're very transparent. If you have this GPA and this test score, this is how much funding you're able to receive as an out-of-state student. But you must have your application in by a certain deadline to be reviewed. Nothing is worse than a student wanting to go to a school that they potentially would have qualified for a significant amount of money, but because they missed the deadline by one day, there's nothing that school can do. You do not want to be that student. Please stay on top of this, apply early to your colleges to make sure that you are not missing out again on free money. Now, when looking at outside organizations and where to begin when looking for these scholarships, you can really go anywhere and everywhere. Okay. The amount of people who supply a scholarship is tremendous, but these are some of my favorite resources and just go-tos, whether it's going to FastWeb, whether it's talking with different community organizations in the area that offer scholarships, to Googling, to using the Ultimate Scholarship Book. Some advice that I can give all of you is everybody likes to start at the beginning of the Ultimate Scholarship Book, right? They're focusing on the first portion of the book. Google, everybody's looking at the first 5 pages of Google. Work smarter, not harder, okay? Go to page 10 of Google. Go to the middle of the Ultimate Scholarship Book. Statistically, you already have increased your chances because less students are applying to those scholarships, okay? So again, smarter, not harder, okay? Because it already probably feels like you have an entire extra class that you're taking just to complete these college applications. We don't want you to be overwhelmed by scholarship applications because this is the stuff that you should be doing to bring down the cost. Now, scholarships greatly differ into how much they cover, right? Some scholarships are as low as $500, some are as high as $20,000. I know how attractive a $20,000 scholarship is. Heck, I wish all of you will get a $20,000 scholarship, but it's important to pay attention to the small scholarships as well. For students who have had the opportunity to have a part-time job while in school, look at your pay stub. How many hours would you have to work to receive $500? When you put it in that perspective, that $500 scholarship seems a lot more significant than when you first looked at it. So again, every scholarship counts. And then just my little insider tip for all of you, and just personal advice, please don't wait to have this conversation. So for students, please have this with your family members. Parents, please have this with your student. It's really important in the college and search and application process that there's transparency of what is expected. Is a student going to be responsible for paying their full tuition? Parents, are you prepared to contribute, a portion? It's important to have that conversation now because there's nothing worse than having this conversation of a student's, April of senior year, and they're scrambling because they have not applied to colleges and universities that meet your financial expectations. And for students, I hope that you all find your dream college or university. But I really want you to emphasize this, that a dream college and university is focused on 3 things equally. That school needs to be an academic fit, it needs to be a social fit, and it also needs to be a financial fit. If one of the 3 does not line up, you're not going to have the strongest college experience that you can have. So again, that dream college is going to have a financial aspect to it as well. I know we quickly went through this presentation, but again, if you'd like to kind of pause this video or take a screenshot, here are some of the links that were referenced throughout today's presentation, everything from that FAFSA toolkit, how to create an FSA ID, that dependent checklist, and then just some very, very broad overview videos of the FAFSA and the CSS profile. If at any point our organization can be of help to you, feel free to reach out to me personally. You've probably accessed this financial aid presentation through our website, but if not, that is going to be our link right there. That is my personal email address and our phone number. Please reach out if you have questions, if you need assistance going through the financial aid or scholarship process. We are here for you as an organization, and we appreciate you tuning in.